Hi, and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Friday, December 20th, 2024. California man allegedly messaged Madison school shooter about plans ahead of attack. The community at a small Christian school in Madison, Wisconsin is reeling in the aftermath of the school shooting that took place there Monday. The incident at Abundant Life Christian School left 2 people dead, 6 people were hospitalized, 2 of them in critical condition. The shooter, identified by authorities as 15-year-old Natalie Runpow, is now also dead. Police haven't described authorities as 15-year-old Natalie Runpow. Police have described her death as an apparent suicide. Here's the latest in the investigation. Authorities say the shooter was messaging with a California man ahead of the attack. According to court records from San Diego Superior Court, Runpow was in contact with a 20-year-old man in California, who on Tuesday was issued a gun violence emergency protective order, which requires a person to surrender any firearms they have. FBI agents stopped and detained Alexander Pfaffendorf after he was discovered plotting a mass shooting with the Madison, Wisconsin shooter Natalie, or Samantha, during an FBI interview. Pfaffendorf admitted to the FBI agents that he told Runpow that he would arm himself with explosives and a gun and that he would target a government building. FBI agents saw the messages from Pfaffendorf to Runpow. The order reads. The order, filed by police in Carlsbad, California, notes a court hearing in early January. It is unclear whether Pfaffendorf, who lives in Carlsbad, has been charged with any crimes or is in custody. The FBI declined to comment on an ongoing investigation. But the San Diego field office of the Bureau said in a statement that they are not aware of any ongoing threats associated with this matter in Wisconsin or California. They said the Madison Police Department is leading an investigation. As part of his motive, police still don't know why Runpow committed the shooting, though they said it appears to be a combination of factors. They said most school shooters display warning signs ahead of time. Authorities are urging anyone who knew Runpow to contact them. Those who commit mass shootings are rarely female, so data is limited on whether female shooters have any unique commonalities. However, there are trends among school shooters in general, says Jillian Peterson, a professor of criminology and criminal justice at Hamline University who studies mass shootings. Perpetrators of school shootings tend to come from childhoods with a lot of violence or trauma. They tend to be in a crisis, isolated, and angry. To study other shooters, they're actively suicidal. Peterson told NPR this week, "We know that perpetrators tend to tell other people they're thinking about doing this." 2 weapons were found at the scene. 2 firearms were just recovered at the school, though authorities say only one was used during the shooting. Madison police say the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives traced those guns, but authorities have not released that information. Wisconsin law prohibits anyone under 18 from possessing a firearm and requires guns to be secured solely around children. However, the state defines a child as under 14 years old. Our laws in Wisconsin are far too lax when it comes to access to guns by children. I do believe that we should have a safe storage laws. We should have background checks. We should have red flag bills, Dane County Executive Melissa Agard said at a press conference on the incident earlier this week. Chris Dolson, a longtime pastor in Madison, echoed Agard's sentiments at a vigil for the victims. No one lives in a place that's absolutely safe because it can happen anywhere. Anybody can get a hold of a gun if they want to. That's enough. We live in a gun country, Dolson told NPR. Prayer is important, but there's a frustration in our community that we don't want to be the community that just says, well, let's pray. So let's talk about justice too. Both those things go together. The 2 victims are named. The Dane County Medical Examiner's Office released the names of the 2 people killed in the shootings. Those 2 victims were both pronounced dead at the scene. One of the victims was a 14-year-old Ruby Vergara. She was a freshman at the school. An obituary for her describes her as an avid reader who loved art, singing, and playing the keyboard. She had a brother, and he described as having a special bond with her cat Ginger and her dog Coco. The other victim was a teacher, 42-year-old Erin West. She was listed on the school's website as a substitute coordinator. According to her obituary, she was the mother of 3 daughters. She is described as enjoying camping with her family, going to sports games at the school, and serving at her church. The community is coming together to grieve. Julie Bolos is a mother of 3 children at the school. She told NPR she felt a sense of community among parents while they waited for the reunification center on Monday to hear if their kids were okay. Her children were physically unharmed, but her 2 daughters, in which were in a nearby classroom, heard gunshots and screaming. "I don't know if you can be a parent in America and not fear that you might get that call," she said. Bolos already has some personal experience with school shootings. She attended high school in Colorado, near where the Columbine shooting happened in 1999. One of her close friends was shot in the library there and survived. She said she always told herself it would be very unlikely that her children would be exposed to gun violence at school, even though she had this experience in her own life. Now she has to work through that fear all over again. According to a database maintained by the Wisconsin-Washington Post, more than 390,000 students have experienced gun violence at a school since Columbine. Mangione faces federal murder and stalking charges over United Healthcare CEO killing. Luigi Mangione, the man accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson outside a Manhattan hotel earlier this month, has been extradited from Pennsylvania to New York from Pennsylvania to face new murder charges. These charges were unsealed in newly filed federal court documents. The 26-year-old is scheduled to appear in federal court on Thursday afternoon in Lower Manhattan. He faces 4 federal counts related to the shooting death of Thompson, including murder, stalking, and interstate travel, according to the unsealed complaint. Mangione also faces 11 counts in state court in New York. If found guilty in federal court, he could face the death penalty. On Tuesday, a Manhattan grand jury indicted Mangione for murder as an act of terrorism, criminal possession of a weapon, and criminal possession of a forged instrument. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg described Thompson's death as a frightening, well-planned, targeted murder that was intended to cause shock and attention and intimidation. The words deny, delay, and depose, language often used to critique the tactics healthcare insurance companies, were found written on some of the shell casings discovered in the crime scene. Mangione, who is represented by Karen Friedman, a former prosecutor with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, waived his right to contest extradition to New York this morning and arrived aboard a NYPD helicopter ahead of a 2 p.m. court appearance. Mangione had been arrested inside a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, 5 days after the shooting, and had initially fought extradition. The 10-page federal charging document gives new details about the events leading up to Thompson's death. According to the complaint filed by FBI agent Gary Kobe, Mangione was found in possession of a notebook that contained several handwritten pages that express hostility towards the health insurance industry and wealthy executives in particular. In one notebook entry dated August 15, 2024, the complaint says writings described how the details are finally coming together, and I'm glad in a way that I've procrastinated because it allowed me to learn more about the acronym for Company 1. The notebook entry also stated that the target is insurance because it checks every box. In another entry corresponding to October 22nd, less than 2 months before the shooting happened in the morning of United Healthcare Investor Conference that Thompson was reportedly scheduled to attend, The notebook read, 1.5 months. This investor conference is a true windfall, and most importantly, the message becomes self-evident. The entry goes on to describe an intent to whack the CEO of one of the insurance companies at its investor conference. This alleged target attack has fueled anger toward the health insurance industry, with some people even praising the shooter's actions on social media. A small crowd of protesters was seen outside the Manhattan courthouse on Thursday, holding signs in support of Mangione. Some workers are losing pay raises after overtime rule was struck down. The Biden administrator's overtime rule would have expanded overtime protections to more than 4 million workers. A federal judge struck down the rule in November, finding the Labor Department has exceeded its authority. Imagine getting a pay raise only to be told weeks later, sorry, we're taking it back. That's what's happening to 306 employees at The Ohio State University now that a federal court has struck down the Biden administrator's overtime rule. Finalized in April, the rule would have made some 4.3 million salaried workers nationwide newly eligible to earn 1.5 times their regular pay when they work more than 40 hours a week. One of the basic principles of the American workplace is that a hard day's work deserves a fair day's labor, wrote Jessica Lumen, head of the Labor Department's Wage and Hour Division, in a blog post explaining the rule. The rule began phased in on July 1st when salaried workers earning less than $43,000 a year became automatically eligible to earn overtime, a hefty increase from the previous threshold, $35,000. The more significant jump would have come on January 1st, 2025, when that threshold was set to rise to $58,656, with an automatic update every 3 years based on current wage data. Employers across the country, it seemed, had two choices: begin paying eligible workers overtime or raise their pay above the new threshold. Ohio State, with a workforce of more than 50,000, decided to do some of both. It converted some employees from exempt to non-exempt status, so they'll be eligible to earn overtime. And they gave raises to others across the institution, including people working in academia, athletics, and the university's medical center and elsewhere. For the 306 people who would become overtime eligible on January 1st, those raises came early, on November 1st. But they were short-lived. A court ruling leads to take a back. On November 15th, U.S. District Judge Sean D. Jordan of the Eastern District of Texas ruled that the Labor Department had exceeded its authority in issuing the overtime rule, finding fault with the new salary threshold, which he said was too high, and with the automatic updating. Given the millions of workers and the large variety of employers who would have impacted by the rule, he wrote that it would be impractical, if not impossible, to tailor it in a way that would be acceptable. So he tossed the rule entirely. A week later, Ohio State delivered the bad news. In emails sent late on Friday afternoon, the 306 employees who had just gotten raises were informed that as a result of reversal in the law, you will no longer receive an increase in your base pay. As a consolation, they were told they could keep the raises through the end of this year. A punch in the gut. One of those employees, an administrative staffer, who asked not to be identified by name out of fear of retaliation, described the move as a punch in the gut. The employee, who oversees 130 student workers, had gotten a salary bump from $55,000 to $58,000, just above the new salary threshold. By rescinding the raise, the employee said Ohio State had sent a discouraging message. We don't value you. What you're doing is not worth the increase. According to the university, the raises for the 306 employees would have cost $2 million, a tiny fraction of its $10 million budget. We know this is disappointing, university officials wrote in the emails to the employees. Given the reversal in the law, we will continue to focus on impact and decisions that consider all of our staff and the university. Echoes of 2016. The Labor Department has appealed the federal court ruling, but it's unlikely to lead to a restoration of any part of the overtime rule before January 20th. When President-elect Trump takes office with what's expected to be a very different agenda. What's unfolding now is eerily reminiscent of what happened 8 years ago, at the tail end of the Obama administration. The Labor Department under President Barack Obama had also attempted to expand overtime protections to some 4 million workers by raising the salary threshold from $23,000 set in 2004 to $47,000. A federal judge blocked the rule a week before it was to take effect on December 1st, 2016. Recognizing that the 2004 threshold was outdated, the Trump administration in 2019 issued its own overtime rule, setting a new salary threshold of $35,000, a level that worker advocates called inappropriately low. With the Biden rule struck down in November, that threshold was back in effect, giving many employers a sense of relief. One nonprofit's case against overtime pay. Up until last month, Carrie Lucas, president of Independent Women's Forum, a conservative nonprofit, had been weighing her choices. Among her staff of 35 are 6 fresh college graduates, each earning well below the new overtime threshold. Raising their salaries to just above the threshold would have cost the organization about $60,000. That's somebody's full salary, says Lucas. We would have had to get rid of one of those younger girls. But without a raise, they would have been eligible to earn overtime pay starting January 1st. For Lucas, that was a non starter given the nature of her organization's work. This past summer, Independent Women's Forum ran the Take Back Title IX bus tour. It features celebrity athletes including swimmer Riley Gaines and tennis veteran Martina Navratilova, campaigning against the inclusion of transgender athletes in women's sports. "30 states in 30 days, and all these rallies everywhere," says Lucas. "The hours were nuts." Still, Lucas says the assignment thrilled many of her employees, particularly the younger ones without family responsibilities at home. One staffer in particular, the younger ones without family responsibilities at home, hit it out of the park, Lucas says, working the length of the bus tour. At the end, she was rewarded with a bonus. It was such an experience, but all that discretion, all of the opportunity to knock my socks off and make me think you are capable of much more than I thought. All of that would have been gone had she been required to pay the staff for overtime, Lucas says. The solution, absolutely, from an HR perspective, would be, you guys don't get to go. For many workers, overtime brings stress. Of course, for most salaried workers, overtime doesn't mean getting to travel the country with celebrities, working on issues you're passionate about. The public comments submitted during the rule-making period, salaried workers describing the physical and mental strain of working 50 to 60 hours a week, often missing family events because of unpredictable schedules without any extra pay. I should not have made those sacrifices to pay my bills. If I do need to miss something that's important to my kids, I should at least be compensated for it, wrote a worker from Arkansas. He described himself as a single father making $50,000 annually as a service manager at a farm equipment dealership. The left-leaning Economic Policy Institute notes that in 1975, more than 60% of full-time salaried workers were eligible to earn overtime pay. But the decades as earning increased and the regulation failed to keep pace, the share of covered workers fell sharply to 7% by 2016. The Obama administration's overtime rule would have covered about a third of full-time salaried employees. Under the Trump rule that replaced it, millions fewer have benefited. While Trump campaigned for a second term on a promise of prosperity for workers, few expect him to defend the Biden rule. It's unclear whether, like last time, he might seek an update of his own. Trump's team did not offer a response when NPR asked about his overtime policy during the campaign. Project 2025, the conservative blueprint for a second Trump administration, changes the overtime protections that would move in the opposite direction, dramatically reducing the number of workers earning overtime pay. One proposal would let employers calculate overtime based on a longer stretch of time. So workers would earn a 1.5 times their regular pay only after exceeding 80 hours over a 2-week period. Another would give employers and workers the option of comp time in lieu of overtime pay.